And welcome to Reasoning Together. The purpose of our channel is to equip Christians to understand what we believe and why we believe it, and ultimately to help us to grow and mature in our faith to bear fruit. So today we're going to start from the very top, and that is there a God? This will likely be a two-part series. The first part will be the origin of matter. Second part will be, is there evidence of design in the creation? Now, I think it's important before we get too far into this to discuss something called worldview. Worldview is a foundational belief that we all have that affects the way we interpret the world around us. Now, at a high level, there's basically two worldviews. The first is a theistic worldview, which means that you believe that there is a God or gods that created everything. The second is an atheistic worldview, which means that you don't believe that there's a God, that all of creation happened by purely natural means. Now, our existence is bound by time, space, and matter. We're bound by time, meaning we can't go back in time, we can't go forward in time, we're just existing as time clicks by. Space, of course, is X, Y, and Z, and then matter is the sun, the moon, the earth, me, my shirt. Everything physical in our existence is the matter component of our existence. Now, I'll be talking specifically about matter, and I find it helpful to look at the most basic element of matter, and that is the atom. Now, an atom is comprised of electrons circling a nucleus, and in the nucleus are protons and neutrons. And we actually discovered in the 1960s that neutrons and protons were made up of groupings of quarks, Quarks. So at least at this point in time, the most basic components of our physical existence are electrons and quarks. So the question is, where did they come from? We can see that we physically exist. We can validate the existence of electrons and quarks. Where do they come from? So there's basically three theories as to the origin of matter. The first is that matter is eternal, meaning matter has always existed. Now there's two problems with that theory. The first is that we live in an existence bound by time. And if you think about it, you can't have something eternal in an existence bound by time. Additionally, one of the definitions of eternal is not being bound by time. But the second thing is with something called the second law of thermodynamics. Now, second law of thermodynamics addresses something called entropy. And entropy is this idea that energy will always find a place of equilibrium. For example, if you have a hot cup of coffee sitting in a room, what happens to the temperature of the coffee? Does it get hotter? Does it boil? Does it get cold? Does it freeze? What eventually happens to the temperature of the coffee? Well, what happens is that the energy in the coffee is given off to the surrounding air until it reaches equilibrium and ultimately becomes room temperature, and that's entropy. So what does that mean for matter being eternal? Well, if matter was eternal, entropy would have taken its full and natural course, and all energy in our existence would be at equilibrium, which means there's no usable energy. And if there's no usable energy, there can't be life. So the fact that we live tells us that matter cannot be eternal. Now, which leads us to the second theory, and that is that matter sprung into existence from nothing. Now, this is one of the views of the Big Bang Theory, and it says that nothing exploded and created everything. So the first problem with that is it's illogical. How can nothing explode? So clearly you have to have something for something to explode. So that's illogical. The second issue is with something called causality. Now, causality says for every effect, there's a cause, right? So in this case, the effect would be our existence, and the cause would be nothing exploding. So clearly, matter cannot spring into existence from nothing. Which leads us to the third theory, and that is that there's a creator that created time, space, and matter. The creator would not be bound by the creation, so would be outside of time, so would be eternal. Now, the challenge with this is not the logic, because it's actually perfectly logical that there's a creator of time, space, and matter. The challenge is we as finite beings, how do we begin to even imagine a being that lives outside of the bounds of our creation? So as far as the three theories go, matter being eternal, matter springing into existence, or there being a creator, the only one that makes sense is there has to be a creator that created time, space, and matter. Now, this is really meant to strengthen your faith. Don't be surprised when your atheist friends and relatives don't respond, right? Because if your worldview starts with there can't be a God, it doesn't matter how much evidence you've got. This is really meant to strengthen your faith, because the Christian faith is very logical. And you'll likely go through times where you're suffering and you won't feel like you're getting answers to prayer, or you'll see injustice in the world. And you may start to question, is there really a God? And it can be very distracting. And my hope is that you can go through this now and determine that it's very logical, that the only logical conclusion that there is a God. So when you go through the suffering, which you'll undoubtedly go through, you'll just press in and know that God has a purpose for that. So I hope this is helpful. Next time we'll talk about, is there evidence of design in the creation? And I look forward to talking about that with you. So be blessed, work out your faith, it'll bear much fruit, and we'll talk to you next time.